Good morning! Let's continue with our lesson. Letter C. Costs for employee services were incurred as follows: direct labor, indirect labor, sales commission, administrative salaries. Sabi dito, sales commissions are paid in cash. How are we going to journalize this? Our entry for this should be debit work in process for the direct labor portion of 180,000. Debit factory overhead control for the indirect portion of the labor. Debit commission expense. It is a selling expense for the amount of 63,000. And salaries expense for the administrative salaries. That is 90,000. Okay? Credit cash for the amount of cash that we paid for the sales commission. Salaries and wages payable for those that have not yet been paid in cash. Letter D. Paid rent for the year was 18,000. 13,000 of this amount related to factory operations and the remainder related to administrative activities. Journal entry should be debit factory overhead control for the amount related to factory operations. The remaining 5,000 is rent expense to administrative activities. Credit cash kasi sabi dito paid. So, nag-outlay ng 18,000. Letter E. Utility costs incurred in the factory 57,000. Therefore, our journal entry for letter E should be debit factory overhead control. This is an actual factory overhead expense. Kaya factory overhead control. Credit accrued utilities payable. No question about that. That is the usual credit. Letter F. Paid advertising expense. The advertising expense, of course, is a selling expense. Okay? Debit advertising expense 140,000. Credit cash 140,000. Letter G. Depreciation recorded on equipment 100,000. 88,000 of which was equipment used in factory operations. Ibig sabihin, papasok yan sa product cost as factory overhead. The remaining 12,000 was on an equipment that is not used in production but administrative purposes. Ibig sabihin, papasok yan dun sa administrative expense. Kaya, instead na depreciation expense yung 88,000, it must be factory overhead control. Kasi pag depreciation expense mo yan, dediretso yan dun sa income statement sa determination ng income or loss without entering the product cost, which is wrong. Ultimately, pupunta sa income statement lahat yan pagka nabenta. But your product costing will be inaccurate. Okay? So, 88,000 depreciation on the equipment used in the factory must enter the product cost as a manufacturing overhead cost. So, factory overhead control na naman kasi siya ay actual cost incurred. Debit depreciation expense for the non-factory equipment. Alright? Credit accumulated depreciation. No question about that. That is the usual credit. Letter H. Manufacturing overhead cost was applied to jobs. How much? The entry would be, ilan ba yung ating manufacturing application? Manufacturing overhead application. Ang sabi, the rate would be determined based on the 330 given yon. Tama? If you remember, please check your notes. Kanina lang. Lumipat lang tayo sa separate sheet. 330 based on a 200,000 peso budget of direct labor. Tama? Based on direct labor cost kasi. So, 1.65 times 180,000. Saan ba ang basis ng ating 1.65 na overhead rate? It must be based on the direct labor cost. Sabi natin, ilan ba yung direct labor cost natin dito? This one, direct labor cost of 180,000. Okay? So, yun yung 180,000 dito. 297,000. Goods that had a cost of 675,000 to manufacture according to the job cost sheets were completed. Completion. Ano na nga ba entry natin dito? Very simple. Debit, finished goods. Credit, work in process. Ayan. 675,000. Letter J. Last one. Sales on account for the year totaled 1,250,000. The total cost to manufacture these goods according to the job cost sheets was 700,000. So, una, kailangan i-record natin yung pagka-benta. So, debit, accounts receivable, credit sales for the sales, the amount of sales. So, at selling price ito. Pangalawa, yung pag-recognize natin ng cost nung nabenta. That would be debit cost of goods sold, which is an expense account, as we have said. Credit to the finished goods kasi nabenta na. So, bawas yun dun sa finished goods inventory. 700,000. Ayos. Let us now go to the second requirement, T accounts. So, yung pag-T account natin dito, mga kasama, wala namang kakaiba, walang bago. If it is an asset account, normal debit. If it is a liability, normal credit, etc. Ngayon, ang tini account lang natin dito, according to the requirement, okay, may sinabi kasi dito sa requirement number 2, prepare T accounts not for everything, but only for the 3 inventory categories. So, factory overhead control, that's number 1. The applied factory overhead, number 2. And then, sabi dito, relevant data from your journal entries to T accounts. Do not forget to enter the beginning balances in your, so binibilinan tayo. And then also compute the ending balance. So aside from the 3 inventory categories, which is your raw materials account, your work in process, and your finished goods, meron pa tayong factory overhead. We have labeled here 1 and 2. So bali 5 lahat. 3 inventory accounts plus itong dalawang overhead account titles na to. So raw materials, work in process, both inventory account titles, kaya normal debit balance. Procedures are exactly the same dun sa ating previous discussion. So 20,000 for raw materials, 32 for work in process, and finished goods 15,000. So hindi na masyadong maganda kung uulitin pa natin isa-isa, no? Alam mo na yan. Not because I'm telling you na alam mo na yan, but because I have discussed it already in the past. Ayan. Factory overhead control, ito yung mga dinebit natin. I-trace mo yung transaction letter B, C, D, E, G were all debited for these respective amounts totaling 290,000. Si applied overhead minsan lang nung letter H, 297,000 according to our application computation. Nandito yon, 297,000. Yan, pinakita natin kanina. So now, it is clear that the actual represented by the factory overhead control and the applied is not the same. Mas mataas ng 7,000 yung application kesa dun sa actual incurrence. Kaya sabi natin, there is an over-application. Over-applied siya. Over-application is a favorable variance. Kaya, pa-deduct siya dun sa cost of goods sold. Makikita mo rito, naka-credit so that it will be diminished or deducted. Ayan, from the cost of goods sold. 7,000. Debit, over, under, applied, overhead. Yan yung account title na ginagamit. So, kung opposite naman, under application, baliktad. Debit cost of goods sold, credit naman itong over, under, applied, overhead. Okay? Next, requirement number 4, statement of profit or loss. Napakadali lang. When teachers like me teach in front of a live audience, we derive satisfaction to some extent from the interaction with students. Yung mga simpleng pagtawa mo sa mga jokes namin, they mean something to us. They make us happy. But teaching in front of the camera is a different thing. We don't even know if you're there. We don't even know if you're listening. So, a simple like dun sa ating video, or a simple present, sir, nandito po kami, nakikinig, we are watching, sir, will inspire us. When teachers like me teach in front of a live audience, we know that you're there. But teaching in front of the camera is not merely sharing our content. It means sharing our time, our devotion, and above all, our passion. So, yung simpleng pag-subscribe mo sa amin, it lets us know that you are there and we are here to continue what we are doing. So, ngayon pa lang, nagpapasalamat na kami. Diyan sa yung subscription, it inspires us. Since it inspires me to wake up every morning, prepare discussion materials, and continue what I am doing. So, thank you so much. Please continue sharing and liking and subscribing. Thank you. Sales, we have already computed for that. Yung ating last journal entry, I think that is your last journal entry. Is that correct? Yes, it is. Journal entry letter J, 1,250,000 with your cost of goods sold that is not yet adjusted to be 700,000. Pag sinabing unadjusted, hindi pa na-close doon yung over or under application. Okay? Sales, 1,250,000. Beginning raw materials is 25,000. Up to, look at your book, we have the same exact material that we are using. This is in aid of your discussion para hindi masyadong mahirapan yung teacher mo. At saka pwede mong ulit-ulitin kahit nasa bahay ka. Okay? But we have the same book. Tignan mo yung libro mo dyan. Purchases of raw materials added from the beginning. So, available for use na 300,000. I-less mo yung ending na 20. So, you have here used in production. Kaso class, yung 280,000 na yan represents the used for both direct and indirect. Kasi isa lang lang yung pinagkuhanan natin ng materials. Galing lang siya dun sa isang account title na raw materials. So yung lumalabas na 280 dito, 60 from the 280 is indirect. So tanggalin mo para ang matira lang yung direct materials. Is that clear? Kasi yung 60 dito, kasama na siya dun sa overhead na kinonsider naman natin sa comparison ng 297. So kung maalala mo, actual overhead was 290. Mas mataas ng 7 yung ating applied. Okay? So direct materials, direct labor, plus your overhead, you have your total manufacturing cost, plus the beginning work in process. Ito kasi yung nagawa mo for this period. Ito yung ending mo nung prior period, which is your beginning in the current period. Total work in process, 707. Less ending work in process. These things are given in the problem. Cost of goods manufactured, 675,000. Plus, yung ending na hindi mo nabenta nung nakaraang period, na beginning mo this period, then you get your total goods available for sale. Less the ending, okay? Then that would equal to the cost of goods sold. Ito yung binibenta mo sa kabuuan. Ito yung hindi mo nabenta, ibig sabihin yung tira, yan yung nabenta mo. But unadjusted, as we have said, kasi may 7,000 tayo dito na over application. It was deducted 693,000. So wala naman tayong adjustments or deductions from the sales. Walang sales returns, allowances, walang sales discounts. So yun na mismo yon, less the 693. 557,000 less administrative salaries, all represented in the journal entries, 95,12,107. Selling expenses, commission, advertising expenses, totaling 203. Your total OPEX or operating expenses are, for both administrative and selling, is 310,000. Net income must therefore be 247,000. Alright? So itong mga notes na to, tulad ng pagkakasulat ko dyan sa libro mo, same lang din dun sa paliwanag na binigay ko na. Last section. Why is it more important to use the applied overhead instead of the actual overhead for product costing? So nabanggit natin kanina, dalawa ang ating account titles na nadadawit dito sa ating study this morning. Applied at saka yung actual. Actual, syempre yung actual incurred. Applied based dun sa application rate na sinasabi ng problem. Ngayon, tignan mo tong dalawang example ko dito, ha? Sigurado ako maintindihan mo to. You are about to enter a theater to watch the latest Avengers film and decided to buy some popcorn. In front of the theater are two popcorn stands that carry the same brand name. You know very well that the same company owns this popcorn stand and both are there to cater the large crowd expected for the day. Nung nagtanong ka, sabi nung isa, okay, stall number 1, magkano po yung popcorn nyo, yung large tub? Ang sabi, 97 pesos. Lumipat ka dun sa isa. Ang sabi, sir, although the same po yung benta ko sa kanya, same company, same everything, iba lang ang bantay, siyempre dun sa stall 1 compared sa stall 2, 100 pesos po ang benta ko. Na-curious ka. Curiosity overtook you and you ask the vendor at stall number 2, why is your price 3 pesos higher than that of the other stall when you sell the same kind, same size, and under the same brand name of popcorn? The vendor then answered, sir, sabi niya sa'yo, I moved slower compared to the vendor in stall number 2. As a result, the direct labor hours consumed at my stall is higher. And since most of the overhead are dependent on direct labor hours, my actual overhead is also higher, thus resulting to higher unit price. Nakita mo yun? So malilito yung customer. Bakit ganon? Exactly the same, magkaiba yung selling price. So how would, sabi ko dito sa ating libro, how would the customer react to this? Syempre, he or she would be surprised. Okay? Another scenario before we make the conclusion. Paso company manufactures specialty vases that need to be manufactured in a highly controlled environment. I'm talking about temperatures here, okay? If the factory temperature is too hot, the vase breaks after the production. If the temperature is too cold, the vase deforms. Experience show that the company spends much more during the summer to cool the factory than it spends during the winter to heat up the factory. In other countries kasi, syempre, alam mo naman, hindi lang sila puro cooling, di tulad sa atin dito sa Pilipinas. Pagka sobrang lamig, kailangan din nila ng heating. So according to the problem, dito sa ating illustration, mas malaki daw ang nagagastos ng company sa pagkukul kesa sa pag-heat, compared sa summer versus the winter. So, ikaw na customer, you walk to one side of the showroom. Sabi dito, tinuro mo yung isang vase, tinanong mo yung presyo. Pumunta ka doon sa kabilang side, tinuro mo yung same exact kind of vase, but this time the unit bears a higher price. At yan na naman, nalito ka. So, tinanong mo yung nagbabantay doon, yung sales personnel. Sabi mo, sir, these units to the left, although exactly ito pala yung sabi nung nagbabantay. Kasi Nagtataka ka kung bakit iba yung presyo. Sabi niya, Sir, these units to the left, although exactly the same to those at the right, are priced higher. Why? Because these were produced during the summer. At ito namang nasa kanan mo, lower expenses yung ginastos daw during winter compared dun sa summer, kaya mas mababa din yung pagbenta nila. O kung ikaw yung customer, isipin mo ano ba naman yan? Does the customer care whether kung kailan ginawa yung vase? Tatanungin pa ba niya kung summer ba to ginawa? Winter ba to ginawa? Walang pakialam yung customer dun. So, conclusion, ito yung sabi natin sa libro. You see, using applied overhead oftentimes through standard costing and computation of predetermined overhead rates instead of the actual overhead smooths out these fluctuations. A customer who wants to buy a tub of popcorn would not care whether the vendor moves slower relative to the other vendor. Okay? He would most probably pick the stall with the lower price. Same is true doon sa kaso ng paso. Okay? Tulad ng sabi natin, the customer would not care whether that vase was made during the summer or during the winter. Pag ginamit mo yung actual cost ng overhead, it results to confusion, not only on the pricing, but initially doon mismo sa costing process. Okay? Okay, class. So that's the bell already. That's it for this meeting. So, ganun-ganun lang, class. A few minutes of your time every day, imbis na kung ano-ano yung pinapanood mo, just make it a habit to watch our videos bilang tulong na rin dun sa sarili mong pag-aaral. Why? Kasi tatandaan mo, hindi lahat ng nababasa mo ng mag-isa ay maririnig mo. At hindi din lahat ng mga naririnig mo ay mababasa mo. Tulungan yan. So with that, see you in our next meeting. See you in the next lesson.